Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Redirection with Terri-Karelle. I'm your host, Terri-Karelle, and I certainly hope that you've been enjoying just kind of tuning in every single Sunday. And even if you can't tune in every Sunday, hopefully you're able to watch each episode during the week. Thank you to those of you who tell me you watch the show, you listen to the show while you're cleaning, you're cooking, you're going to church, you're coming back from church, you're walking the aisle of the supermarkets. Just thank you for allowing me to occupy just a little bit of your time and a little bit of your space. For those of you who go a step further and you go ahead and you like, you share, you comment, you review, you rate, you subscribe, when you do that, actively and consciously, what you do is you allow the podcast to reach even more people. It's recommended across various platforms. So I just want to thank you for that. For all things redirection, please don't be afraid to visit redirectionpodcast.com. And if there's anybody who you think has an amazing redirection story, that is where you would go and send your emails, and we will follow up since then, or we will follow up from there, excuse me. And if you're sharing across social media, don't forget to use the hashtag TKRedirection. Now, I don't know if you know this, but putting on a production can be very hard, very tedious, and I would not be able to do season 3 without my partner. So this podcast is brought to you by MasterCard in association with Heineken 00 and Toyota Jamaica. Really want to thank Toni Aiken, who has just been holding it down every single episode, trying to ensure that the sign language interpretation takes place and that it is truly authentic so that no one gets left behind. To Concepts, Spaces, Go Shore Couriers, to Brescia, FHC Credit Union. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Without you, none of this could be done. And of course, Beauty Brands by MDS. Everybody who has come in, they absolutely love the products, your Tree Hut products. That is definitely going to keep their body and their skin nice and clean. So, all of that being said, who is coming next to the redirection seat? I am looking forward to this conversation. It is extremely important for inclusion to be a part of the conversation. So when you think of barriers, this person basically looked at all of them and said, it's not going to faze me. I'm going to come, I'm going to show up. And by taking the lessons learned by family, she made sure that disabilities is not going to stop her and is not going to define her. I'm looking forward, extremely excited. Redirection with Terri-Karelle starts now. So this is a different episode of Redirection with Terri-Karelle. In fact, I don't even think it is fair to say Redirection with Terri-Karelle because it is and Toni Aiken. Normally, when you guys are watching the program, you see Toni standing off and probably on the right-hand side of your screen. But this is a very different kind of interview. And if you watch season 2 last year, you would have seen that I interviewed a deaf choreographer, creative director, dancer, who would have been the very first deaf graduate from the Edna Manley School for the Performing Arts. And so we invited Toni on set. And so you can only imagine that if Toni is on the set and Toni is co-hosting, clearly we have a very special guest with us. And I cannot wait to get into the conversation. So Toni, first of all, thank you for your service. For those of you who want to create more atmospheres that are inclusive, it's Toni Terp. Consultation as well as interpretation services. We couldn't do this without you. But my guest, who is in the redirection seat with us today, is the one and only Tashi Widmer. And funny enough, it was Toni who recommended Tashi for this conversation today. And so I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And thanks to Toni as well for inviting me to be here. It's really an honor. Before I proceed, I want to describe who I am and what do I look like. So I'm a Black woman. I have natural hair. It's in a bun. I'm in blue. I have a white jacket. I have a color bracelet on my hand, different colors. I have a purple watch. And I'm sitting in a chair. The background is red. My name is Tashi, last name Widmer. And this is my sign name. It's deaf culture to have a name that identifies who you are, and this is it, Tashi Widmer. And it's really an honor to be here with you this morning, to have a conversation, to share my story, and to share my journey as to how I arrived at this point. So thank you.
There is one thing she forgot though. She's absolutely beautiful inside and out. So I'm going to add that for Tashai. Now, talk to me about who you are right now. You have contributed to the space and to society and to deaf community and deaf spaces in various capacities. But currently, you are the executive director of the Jamaica Sign Language Bible Translation. Now, is this where you thought you would be if you were looking back at little Tashai? Like, what were her dreams, and where you are now, did it align with those dreams?
Really, my journey is fascinating. My role now as the executive director for JSLBT, Jamaica Sign Language Bible Translation. I was born in a family where both my parents are deaf. I have a brother who is deaf and a sister who is hearing, but we're all signers. We've been signing from we're small, you know. In the future, I didn't thought I would be an executive director. I thought I would be more like, funny enough, when I was small, I thought I would be a secretary. I don't know why.
I was gonna ask why.
I just liked it. I don't know why. But I just saw my mom preparing lists because she was a teacher. And I was like, ooh, I want to write, I want to do that. So I thought that meant a secretary. I just connected that with it, so I don't know why. So the point of the story is I grew up with an easy journey, yes and no, because my family is deaf, so sign language was a part of my family. The society didn't understand or knew how to include deaf people as yet. So I grew up, I went to a deaf school. Let me tell you first, let me go back a little bit. I was born in St. Elizabeth, Southwest St. Elizabeth, in a community called Down Country. That's where I was born.
The community is called Down Country.
Yes, Down Country. It's an interesting name, now that you think about it. But yes, it's called Down Country. And my father, is generational deafness. So both sides, mommy and daddy, everybody, family, uncle, auntie, cousins, everybody's deaf. And so I grew up in that situation. And my father himself, he never went to school. So he couldn't read and write. He wasn't literate. But he had sense. He was always counseling me, always teaching me, using country sign language.
Hold on, then stop right there. Stop right there. Because I know my viewers and my listeners are going to be like, what do you mean by country sign language? Because I know that there is JSL, which represents Jamaica Sign Language. And I know that when you go to different territories, you have Russian Sign Language, America Sign Language. But I did not know that there was something called country sign language. So before we even go any further, help us to understand, because this is a wonderful opportunity to exchange and to learn. What is that? I didn't even know it existed.
Sure. Country sign is developed by the community. It's indigenous to the community. It wasn't in schools. They weren't in school, so they created a way to communicate. And it's innate. They needed a language, so they developed one, and they developed several concepts, objects, subjects, and they created a sign to match that concept. And that's how country sign was developed, and it became a language. So, for example, for father, how would you describe a father, a man with a beard, right? So this is a sign for father in country sign. So for mother or woman, yes, it can be very visual or illustrative, and you clearly identify it. But for woman, it's woman. Right, so it's clear.
Naturally.
Right, so it was just conceptual based, and it was developed, and the community started using it, and took over and
It became a part of the
Country Sign
culture.
Language, and it's organic. It's a natural language that was developed in the community, and it became Country Sign.
So then, although that might have been her primary or her first, I guess, her first meeting with sign language, naturally there has to be an active learning process where Jamaican Sign Language comes in, yes?
Country Sign, that's my parents. That's my father's first language. But my mom, JSL/Country Sign, because my mom went to school.
Yes.
She's a teacher. She's exposed to Jamaican Sign Language. So she was exposed to both. So I learned both while growing up. My father, when my father is there, Country Sign. When mommy alone is there, Jamaican Sign Language. Father is there, Country Sign alone. Because we believed it's important for access. We wanted daddy to feel included. So Country Sign was a part of our home. So we really have two languages, Country Sign and Jamaican Sign Language in our home. And that's what we used growing up. Jamaican Sign Language belongs to the Jamaican deaf community. It's the same as Country Sign. It's the same concept. And I grew up with access to both languages, and then later I picked up English later on.
And we're
I
going
think
to talk about that.
2.5, I started picking up English. So from birth, Country Sign, GSL, Country Sign. From I was a baby. When I was in my mommy hand, signing. When I was in the chair, signing. Growing up, signing, exposed. Until about 2, I started to pick up words in English. What does that mean? And connect it to the signs, and we're like, oh, that's the English word, that's what it means in sign language, etc. And just connect the dots.
How much do we take it for granted about literacy? Being deaf is one thing, but how often do we overlook the fact that literacy exists, that access to education exists, that even as a deaf citizen, one has to learn how to read and how to write, not just a matter of signing. And what, in your experience, has the lived experience been for deaf children? Because it sounds as if you have a very unique upbringing where you had parents who not only encouraged you to go to school, but you were experiencing Jamaican Sign Language and Country Sign. But we know that's not the same for other families. Let's talk a little bit about that.
You're correct. Research shows that around 95% of deaf and hard of hearing children are born in families with no sign language. None. 95%. Which means they aren't exposed to language from birth. They don't get that exposure. And we call it language deprivation. You know, they're not getting access to language. It's not there. Most of the times it's the first time that the parents would have a child who is deaf, so they don't know how to deal with it. We are called deaf of deaf adults, which is DODA. We are exposed to sign language early, just like a hearing child who is born to hearing parents, whether it's Patois or English, they're exposed from birth. They're hearing everything and they're taking in everything. But for a deaf person, it's not the same because they need sign language. So it means my experience is really unique because my parents, both of them are deaf. And you're right, my father wasn't literate. My mom had a literate foundation. So because of being a teacher, my mom believed that her children must sign and read and write because that's what life requires. It requires English, which means it doesn't matter that you're deaf or hard of hearing. You have to be able to function. And you learn in Country Sign, you must learn Country Sign, and you must learn how to read and write so that you can be independent citizens.
So talk to me about...
I learned that. That's something I learned. Writing for every day, we had to do that to be able to communicate with others. So in the general society, many children who don't have language at home and their parents, they don't know how to communicate with the deaf child, Often they wait, and it's delayed. And it's important. Language acquisition is important early. From 0 to 6, that's called the early developmental years. It's important to catch language in that time period, right? So it means language was delayed, and it impacts their literacy. And because of that, literacy is behind. And when a deaf person goes to school, they struggle. That's what happens.
What was the school experience for her? And is it that, I mean, she's starting to learn English, she's doing her Jamaican Sign Language, and it may sound like a stupid question, but because I really am sitting at her feet to learn, did she always go to a deaf school, or did she transfer to what we would call a normal hearing school? What was your school experience like?
Thank you for that. My mother worked as a teacher. I was at a deaf school by the age of 2. I was learning. My mom was my first teacher. You know me, it's my mom. Oh, wow, I felt good. I can manipulate her. Of course, you know. My mom, I'm my mom's girl. And, you know, it felt good, but my mom was strict. She said, you need to go to learn. That was something that I experienced, having my mom as my teacher. She was really strict. And I started at 2. Generally, people start at, you know, basic school at 3, 2, and then grade 1, etc. So I started early. I started school at 2. And by the age of 10, the first deaf school, it's called Maranatha School for the Deaf, MSD, that's in St. Elizabeth. By 10, I moved to Caribbean Christian Center School for the Deaf in North Patrick because I passed the program. There was, I needed more competition and something to challenge me. Right. I needed that. So they put me at the Caribbean Christian Center School for North Patrick. And then I was studying, and then by 14, I already maxed it. I maxed the program, so they needed to put me in another school. And they said, They had a discussion with the school, Bel Air High School in Mandeville. It's a private school. Can a deaf student be placed in your program? And they said, it would be the first time that a deaf student is coming. Will there be an interpreter? They said, fine. We did a test, we qualified, we entered, and it was called, it was a proficiency test to see if I could manage their high school program. I did it, did well.
She boxed it out.
Yes, right, yes. And I went in, I was the only deaf, the first deaf person in a hearing program. It would be considered a mainstream program for the first time. And I had an interpreter with me, so my last 3 years of high school was in Bel Air High School. They were amazing experiences, but challenging as well, because I was the only deaf person. Everybody else was hearing. I had an interpreter. I had to figure out who would take my notes for me. While the teacher was talking, I had to pay attention. I needed a note taker. I had to ask my classmates. I had to focus on the interpreter and the teacher. And remember, English is my second language, so I'm reading, trying to excel. And not 14, I think 11 years at a deaf school, 3 years at a high school, so I did 17 years. At 17, I graduated from Bel Air, and I went to college. I was the only deaf person in a hearing university as well.
Hold on, she's going too fast. Let me tell you, because...
when I'm telling a story, I just keep going, you know?
Because I have so many questions, right? Because being the first is beautiful on paper. Sometimes being the first makes you a pioneer. It sets the path and the stage and the tone for other people who are coming behind you. But many times, and I read it in a book by Adam Grant called The Originals, it's one of my favorite books. He speaks about the original being the person, the first person who experiences the trials, the tribulations, the challenges, because not only is it hard for the person coming in, but for the space that has always been the same for millions of years, now having to try to accommodate and facilitate. I guess what I want to know is, was there any fear? I mean, you seem like a very confident person, and believe it or not, whenever I meet blind persons, deaf persons, they're always super confident. But I want to know, as you transitioned into this very uncertain new territory and space, was there fear? Was there discomfort, even though you knew you are bright, of what this could possibly be and how it could shape or even ruin where you are at now? And if you did, what were some of the things that you actively did to keep the negativity out? And were there people who were a part of that integration that really made you say, okay, I can do this?
Yes, I appreciate that question so much because people ask me, how did you reach here? How did you make it? And I let them know I can name many people who supported me to reach this point. I remember when my parents, of course, they're number one, of course. Yes, especially my father. I want to choose him. I'm impressed by my father because he never went to school, but he never once felt like I'm not valued as a deaf person. He never felt that way. I never saw that in my father growing up. He was always counseling me. He would say, this is country sign language now. I'm telling you, I am telling you, you don't need to listen to anybody. You believe you can do it. You don't need to be afraid. You can. Work hard and be bright. And I don't know what that is. But you can.
She used a country sign and Tony said, hold on, we missed that word there.
That was his way of expressing. That's what I was showing you. We always had daddy-daughter dates on a Sunday. Every morning, daddy-daughter dates. That's one of my favorite. I'm so sorry, tissue. I'm very emotional. My father died.
Oh, so sorry. I understand.
Always, yes.
I understand. And I could tell.
I could tell you.
I could tell. That's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Don't apologize. That's daddy.
Yes. He would always counsel me that one of my deepest messages that stick with me to this day, no matter the challenge as a deaf person, he would say, and I'm using JSL, so I'm translating what I just said. As a deaf person, it doesn't matter what society says. It doesn't say you can't. It doesn't mean if you can't hear, you can't talk. You can. You can succeed, but you have to work harder. You have to study harder. You have to perform harder, and you have to show proof that you can, and you can be on par with anyone else. Study, graduate at the highest level, and give your best. And that was his message. That was my father's message. And that was something that he counseled me growing up, and it stuck with me. So I appreciate him, and I appreciate that. And no matter the challenges that I experienced through life, from I was growing up, school, I went to Maranatha School for the Deaf, transferred to Caribbean Christian Center for the Deaf. It wasn't an easy journey because my interests, my motivation and my passions were different from others. I'm a little weird, to be honest. I'm a little weird. I'm a homebody. I like to keep to myself. I love to read a lot of books. I'm not a social person. That's my personality. So it's a little bit strange as a teenage girl. But in high school, you would have drama class and, teenage drama in high school. So bullying or some people would say, Tasha, you think you're smart, you know? I would experience that type of teenage drama. But I had to remind myself that it doesn't matter how people view me. I should not change to accommodate them. I am Tashi, and God made me Tashi, and I'm fine with that. And it's okay to be you. God made you, and it's all right, it's all right. I don't need to accommodate or try to fit in. And that's something that I remembered from my father's counsel. So I finished CCCD program, maxed it, went to Bel Air High School, that's a sign. Maxed it. I was the only deaf person there, trying to figure out how to adapt, how to fit in. And I remember there are many challenges, but there are two specific situations where I felt, whoa, I don't blame the school. I think it was a shaping experience for me, and it was good for me individually, and I appreciate it and I accept it. One of the experiences, I learned French.
Hey, hold on, I'm sorry, excuse me.
I wanted to learn French.
Because right now I have people on the crew who still struggling to learn English, right? And they just heard Tasha say, you know, she was learning French, and I see everybody say, what? Basic. Did I not tell you guys? Basic. Continue.
So I wanted to learn French, and at that time, I said, who is interested to sign up for CXC French? And I was in grade 9 at the time, and I said, I want to learn French. But you're deaf, how are you gonna do the orals? I said, I can write it. I don't have to speak, I can write. For the oral exam, I can write it. For me, you can, you know, adjust it to accommodate my needs, you know, assess me that way. And they said, oh no. And I had to fight. I wanted to do French, and they kept telling me no. And they sent it to the assessment team. And my mentor, also my former principal from CCCD campus, she is somebody who I look up to, who really influenced my life a lot. Her name is Miss Lola Wright. That's her sign name, Lola Wright. She's awesome. She came with me and she said, Tasha wants to learn French. Give her the opportunity. Give her the chance. And they said no. And there were deep discussions. And they said the oral exam, how's she gonna talk? She can't talk. Tasha can't speak. How is she gonna speak? And it was a battle, and I couldn't. And I was upset. And that was one moment where I felt, being deaf, I pitied myself in that moment. I felt, and then I instantly remember what Daddy said. And I said, okay, fine. Not because I'm deaf, that's their attitude problem. It's not me. It's not me being deaf, it's an attitude problem.
It's a
I had to
perspective
reframe my mind and say, it's not because I'm deaf. For a 14-year-old girl at that time to be thinking about that, to be reframing your mind and say, no, it's not because I'm deaf. I wasn't able to learn French, but my attitude helped me to persevere and to be resilient. The second challenge that I had in high school was tennis. I wanted to play tennis. At high school, I wanted to involve in the competition, you know. I wanted to be a part of it, you know. And they say, oh, you're deaf. Oh, you're going to hear the communication. And I felt like, again, a barrier again. And being deaf, that's the reason? Come on, find another way. Many sports, they find ways to use, you know, flags, or a person comes around to communicate and I can look across and communicate. There's so many ways. After having a lot of conversation, I was broken again, because it was my favorite sport at the time. And I wanted to participate. I wanted to be in the competition. And they said no. So those were the two main barriers that I experienced. But for those, the second time, I did doubt myself again.
Yes.
You know, like, I'm deaf. And I had to keep reframing. Remember what your daddy say. Remember what your daddy say. And I have to be thankful for my father for that. Because if daddy didn't tell me that when I was young, what would be the outcome?
Who knows? So we're going to college. We're going to college. And perhaps I'm also interested in knowing even the community. Because sometimes when they see, when one person is doing very well and is doing what others have never done before, you are not just representing yourself and your family, but sometimes you become a representation of the community. So now you're going to college, which again, and you can let me know if I'm wrong, is not a deaf school or a deaf college, but this is you now integrating into a higher level, higher education, more people, bigger student body. What's that like, and what did you choose to study?
Reframe the question again. The last part.
So, well, one, you're now thinking about going to to college, and I'm making the point that you represent more than even yourself and your family, but you're representing community. You are doing what many others have never been able to do. What do you choose to do at the college level? And what were other people outside of school telling you? Were they rooting for you, or were they kind of going, boy, this will go rough?
I tend to stray, but be patient with me. Be patient with me. I will reach there. I will reach there. For college, it's really fascinating. God put people in my life for a reason.
Amen.
That's something that I believe. I was 17. I met my host family, people who became my host family for college. My college was in the USA. I met that family. We had conversations. Somehow they felt God told them to do something more with this young lady, meaning me. And they didn't understand what it meant. They didn't know. And they spoke with my principal. I'm interested to do something more, not only meeting her, but I want to help Tashi. And they said, Tashi is interested in going to college, but she don't want to stay on the dorm because the cost is going to be expensive. And the whole family was like, oh, she can stay with us. We're willing to provide accommodation. No problem. So I was able to go to college and stay with that family. God blessed me with that family.
God is good.
Yes. Yes. And I slept in their house. It was in Indiana. And traversed back and forth to university. And I did guidance counseling and psychology. But it didn't match my dream to be a secretary, remember?
Exactly, it's completely different.
Counseling and psychology, it didn't, I wanted to be a secretary. But anyways, the reason I became I recognized that the deaf and the hard of hearing community had a trouble with identity.
Yes.
Had an identity crisis. Mental health, growing up, the experiences, the different emotional experiences. I recognized that's something that was big in our community. And I wanted to give back to the deaf community. With my skills, what I could use for the community to develop the community. And I thought, let's go to college and focus on psychology and counseling, guidance and counseling. And I love listening to people. I love the one-on-one. I don't like big groups, but I'm good on a one-on-one intimate situation. And I went to college, studied that, went into university. I was the first deaf person to enter that university, which is amazing. Others, yeah, it's amazing. I was the first, and at the time there was no interpreter. No interpreter. No.
What?
That's right, God. I have to tell you that. I went into university, no interpreter. I let the university know I need an interpreter. They said, oh, you need an interpreter? Okay. they don't know, they didn't have the experience, they didn't know how to accommodate a deaf person. I was the first deaf person in their university. And they tried to figure it out. They tried to research it, type on the laptop for me to follow what's happening in the classroom. And in the classroom, I was reading everything on the laptop, looking at the teacher, reading everything. The professor is lecturing, and it's a classroom full of students, and somebody's typing on the laptop, and I'm reading. And the professor is at the front, and the screen is there, and he's presenting, and the person is just typing everything that's said on the laptop. And I'm looking back and forth. My eyes were stressed out. At the time, I thought I couldn't manage. I was saying, how could I advocate for my deaf? At the time, I didn't have a full understanding of how to advocate for sign language interpreting as a deaf person.
That's a big speech.
I went into the chapel, and they had worship there, and I was looking at the words on the screen, the song, and I was signing the song, and there was no interpreter there, just signing what I saw. And guess what happened? The person behind me was a student, but a certified interpreter. But they were there as a student.
No.
Yes,
no
yes.
Way.
Yes, so I was signing, and my host mother at the time was trying to support me, but she wasn't the best at signing. So she would text, and I'd look back and forth, and the interpreter behind me, I don't know what she was doing, and she noticed, and she recognized that I was deaf, and she came around and said, "Are you deaf?" I said, "Yes." I said, "There's no interpreter," and she said, "Oh no, let me sign." And she went up and she started signing. And she said, "No interpreter? This is America. We have the Disabilities Act, we have the ADA. They have to provide interpreting services for deaf students at university." And she went with me to the administration department, the office. And the university, they didn't say no, they were awkward. They just didn't know how to accommodate me. So they went, had a discussion through her connections with an interpreting agency. They connected and provided 2 interpreters for my university program for the 4 years.
Did you go down on your knees and say, "But God, let me tell you something about the God that I serve"?
Course. Yes, of course. Come on, man. I had to. I was so grateful. While worshiping, somebody behind me, certified, saw it, and everything just happened after that. And one of the interpreters became my mentor. She came to my wedding. We're friends ever since. So it's amazing.
I call them helpers, destiny helpers. And we often speak about the fact that sometimes we see people who are extremely accomplished, extremely successful. They're navigating life and they're attaining. And, right now we hear the term self-made all the time, self-made millionaire, self-made billionaire. And I go, no, in this world, on this life, on this journey that we travel, a lot of us are exposed to things because someone has opened a door for us. We have gone from one level to the next because someone was placed in our lives at the right time, at the right place to take us to the next level. And that's why I do not believe in coincidences, because you cannot tell me that it was a coincidence that you would be there and the person who needed to help you would have been positioned right behind you, just close enough, but just far away to see and understand that they could assist, but not take it, but to take it further, to not just sign and interpret in that moment, but then to go and advocate on your behalf. A lot of us are talk shops. We talk a lot and we can give you the information, but many of us will not hold the hand of the next person to take them to where they need to be. And I think that's one of the most mind-blowing stories, because now you move from a place of inadequacy, not because you can't do the work, but because you're not facilitated. And now you are able to process the information like everyone else. You're no longer at a disadvantage. And now you are graduating.
Correct.
How did that feel? And was Daddy still alive at the time to see you graduate?
that I fully agree with what you recently said. The person was there for a purpose, for a reason. It's called divine appointment, you know? It's just there for a reason. Why? Her advocacy showed me what advocacy looks like. I learned how to advocate. And now I can advocate for the deaf community, advocate for myself, advocate for my family. I can, because she showed me what that looks like. And I learned that. So I fully agree with what you said. And now going back, I graduated 2009.
Yes.
My father was not able to come to the graduation. There were some issues with his birth certificate. He wasn't able to travel. That was my one disappointing moment. He wasn't able to travel. But we filmed everything. We, man, take picture, everything, film everything, and carried it and showed him. But my mom, my aunts, my sister, my brother, all except my father came for my graduation. And that was a precious moment for me, my family being there, seeing my university family, seeing me walk with the cap, getting my degree, everything. It's truly a precious moment. And for your question about coming back home, I used it, yes. I worked for the Jamaica Association for the Deaf as a social worker.
Yes.
I worked with the parents who had deaf children, deaf and hard of hearing children. I worked with them for a while. And then just to show them how precious their children are.
And what's possible.
To develop skills and school placements, how to place them in proper schools. To be a deaf model, to show that you can be successful. Because the first deaf, when you see a deaf or hard of hearing child, the automatic thought is failure. But that's not true. Yes, you're going to grieve because you know you're not expecting a deaf child, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, it's your child. And they can succeed if the family is willing to invest, to love, to care, and to provide the resources that is necessary, and to learn language, and to feed that, expose that child early, and place them in school. And not just depend on the school, but actually have an environment at home where it's connected.
Yes.
The foundation, they will succeed. And that was my work. That was me telling parents for 3 years that, you know, they go and get the hearing test at the ABR clinic, auditory brain stem response. It's a test that they give to babies. And they test if they're hearing, and they test the level of hearing loss or the deafness, profound, severe, mild, etc. And if there's no deafness, or if you have deafness, depending on the severity,
yes,
there are different levels, of course. They give you options for resources, where to go, provide parents with the skills, which schools they should be in, etc. That was my job. I enjoyed it. That was an interesting experience because it helped me to understand parents' perspective. Because I was a deaf child and I only understood the deaf child perspective. But now I understood
on the
hearing person's perspective and their view. And I appreciated it. So it was a balance. It gave me a balance and an understanding.
Based on the fact that you've been able to acquire your lived experiences, you've experienced life as a deaf person, you've been more exposed than many, and not even just many deaf, but even many hearing people. You've been able to work in spaces to advocate for and to help to educate and to help increase awareness. Where are we in terms of Jamaica as a society? We know that the Disabilities Act was passed 2 years ago, which should mean something. We don't want it to just be something on paper, but rather something that we execute, that when persons with disabilities want opportunities, that there aren't those barriers that exist. What are we doing right? What are we still doing wrong?
Good question. That question will be a hot topic discussion question forever. And that question should be continuously asked. It doesn't matter how often, because it will show that we have a learning spirit and we want to know what's happening. There's a saying that says nothing about us without us. It's a famous saying for disability, the disability group. Anytime you want to develop a program or an app or an activity or include diverse people, we should approach with an open mind, an open heart.
Yeah.
No agenda behind it. You know, human nature, we always there's an agenda. I've learned that the hard way myself, personally. No agenda, just seeking to understand. Seeking to understand. So, ask the community, what do we want? Work with us. What do you think? What do you think about this? What's your perspective on this? What's the best approach? What's the best possible approach? Seek to understand. Also try to, I know the different perspectives, to work with people. We have allies.
Yes.
You know, we tend to have allies. Ask their perspectives as well. Any activity or any project we're doing, don't only think of the majority. You have to think of, quote unquote, the minority. I like to use the word diverse groups. I don't like majority or minority. I like diverse because they're people too. Just diverse,
Correct.
just different.
I agree.
So I think seek to understand. I think often we struggle, we assume we know
Yes.
what we're doing. That assumption, that's an issue. So we have to be careful. Ask. We're developing this. Do you think this is friendly to the deaf community? Do you think this can work for your group? And if not, you make the adjustments. I remember an experience once with an organization. They were developing a project and they asked me, do you think this works for the deaf and hard of hearing community? And I looked through and I did give some feedback. And their response was, we worked hard on this. I know you're complaining. And I was like, you had an agenda, you know? Try not to come with an agenda in the back of your mind.
Yes.
Just be ready to receive. It's simple, but it's not easy.
And we understand that with making change doesn't happen overnight. And quite frankly, I think if you put yourself in a position and there is no agenda and you really want to be a part of the change and the progress that you want to see, then it means that you need to go back to the drawing board. It simply means that you didn't account for certain things. So yes, it might be a change to your budget. It might be more considerations, but if you really are working with a purpose and you really want to make the lives of other people better and you want to include other people, that certainly was the wrong attitude. But then we understand that people have agendas and we understand that people have attitudes and biases that continue. Even when you started the program and you opened up by describing yourself and you did that for the purposes of persons who are blind, I think it's also important for all of us to realize that we have a duty, I think, to put ourselves actively in spaces we would normally be in. Because if I didn't host a particular event that had a lady who was their guest speaker who introduced herself like that, I would not have given consideration to the importance of describing oneself so that blind persons or blind audiences don't miss out on the opportunity. And so the fact that you're saying invite people to the table, you can't create things for people in mind if you have not had a conversation with them. You have not asked them, does this make sense? And I think that's the difference between real advocacy and performance. I think we have a lot of performative behavior where it sounds good, it looks good, the optics are great, but are we really doing what needs to be done and trying to ensure that we improve other spaces? And so that is, it sounds very simple, but I think it's actually a very practical approach. One day, go to a deaf church. Yeah. One day, go to the cafe and order your coffee from deaf can baristas.
Yes, yes.
Get out there.
Yes, yes.
Of all of your experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, and of all the things you have managed to achieve in this world, and I mean, I know our time is running down, and I actually no, I want to ask you this question before I get to that one. You are now the executive director for Jamaica Sign Language Bible translation. Just tell me very quickly, how did you jump into that? I can see that your faith is important to you, Christianity is important to you. How did you jump over to that?
JSLBT was launched last September.
Yes.
So it's still
It's a
new.
baby.
It's a baby organization, right? We, the team, we're in the middle of analyzing data, which means we recently did some collecting of some vocabulary from the entire island. We went all over the island to figure out what are your signs, JSL and country sign, Jamaican Sign Language and country sign. We haven't started the translation process. It's important to collect the data.
Yes.
And then after collecting the data, we are editing it individually, each sign, each vocab, and then we're analyzing it word by word, following the linguistics rules, looking at the facial expressions, the hand shapes, the orientation, the location, the movement, for the English terms. Why? It will help us to know that that sign represents this in the entire Jamaica. So linguistics is always evolving, always changing, always. So it means sometimes we'll see some signs that are different and it's the first time and it's new, or one English word, maybe 5 or 6 different signs for that one English word. So how do we determine to choose which word is most appropriate? Or do we use all? What's the approach we're going to do? So that's where we are now in our analysis. And we're thinking about it. And now we have around 3,500 signs that needs to be analyzed individually. But the other linguistic features need to be analyzed as well. So that's our focus now. And we're analyzing, and our goal is trying to finish by the end of July.
Yes.
And then in August, we'll have translation training, and then we'll start the translation process of the Bible.
Beautiful.
So that's something that we're doing, and we're translating. We're continuing the translation. Our energies right now are focused on analyzing, but it's both fun, exciting, and also taxing, tedious, both.
And I can tell because I can see how she lit up about the research and the data and the collation and, you know, just trying to learn more about people, which I think is one of the nicest things any human could do for another human. Very quickly, what is the legacy you want to leave in this world? She's thinking. When people talk about you or recall you by name, what would you want them to remember or to say about you long after you've gone?
Good question. Last April was Deaf History Month. I did a lot of thinking about people who impacted my life. And I know my mom's comment would say, whatever you're doing, do it cheerfully and with your heart. Give with your heart and don't expect anything in return. So it's human nature to always want appreciation or acknowledgement or just acknowledgement. Sometimes we want that, and that's fine. That's nice, you know. All of us appreciate that. But at the same time, what I would like to leave, what legacy I'd like to leave is Tashi was a cheerful server. She cherished relationships cheerfully. Not because of obligations, but just cheerfully doing it. And I think maybe that's a legacy I want to leave behind. Thank you for that question.
It's very profound, and I think it's a beautiful promise that you're making to yourself and the people who you will impact, even if you are not aware. My final two questions, I promise. Of all the moments you've experienced in your life of exposure and impact and influence and hard work and giving cheerfully, what would you say is your most priceless moment?
Seeing an aha moment. When you see full language access, for me, my passion is access, you know, not having, you know, access to information. So having language access will be my lifelong passion, to see full language access provided. So seeing other deaf and hard of hearing people getting access to Jamaican Sign Language, that, in JSL, it means, yeah man, finally. When they go that in JSL means finally I get access, finally I understand. And for me, that is a priceless moment. I want that moment.
And it's so simple. It is so simple, and it's probably things that we take for granted, but we understand, even listening to your story, how impactful it is that you had early access and that you had people and institutions that tried their best to facilitate you, that you were able to self-actualize, and you are still becoming the person who you want to become. So the very final question, with the name of the program being Redirection with Terri-Karelle, you can't leave the seat without answering this question, which is, what is your definition of redirection, even as you've seen how it has worked in your life?
That's profound. What a good one. I'm trying to summarize it into a short, you know, way to express it. You know, I have like a whole heap of things I want to say, so I'm trying to, you know, make it succinct. One word? Can I give you one word answer?
No. Well, if you want to give me one word, that's fine. You can give me whatever you think, your definition, or how you perceive redirection.
Blake always said, I love so many words, so
Blake is her husband, by the way, guys.
I tend to give you a long answer. Yes, my husband, yes. I was thinking realignment, but redirection, I think, it's a change of focus. What is our focus? It changes. What is your dominant focus? What takes up our time? What takes up our attention? How we find a good use of our time. And if it's not a good use of our time, it changes and it becomes a meaningful use of our time. How we provide our resources for the community to be developed, to be enriched, maybe, I think.
No, man, I totally get it. And we ask every single guest at the end of the show, and everyone has a different definition, a different meaning, depending on what kind of redirection he or she has experienced. And so there is no wrong and right. It is just truthfully yours, and it is meaningful to you. And so for me, when you said that, my understanding is, no matter what comes, it is you being able to manage yourself in that time and to refocus and sometimes shift energies and shift priorities, and to maximize on that focus in whatever it is you are doing. So that was my understanding. If did I
Yeah, perfect.
Tashai, thank you. You have such a beautiful spirit, such a beautiful soul, and I just think it's interesting how God has used you and has made you an example, and how lovely you have been to not only give Him the glory but to be the example. Toni said it before we came on set that when she looks at you and when there is interaction, you are a Christian. And I love the song that says, they'll know we are Christians by our love. And it seems to me that you love cheerfully, you give cheerfully, and you impact cheerfully. So I want to thank you for honoring us with your presence and for sitting in the redirection seat for season 3. I absolutely appreciate it. I'm inspired. I am inspired. Thank you. And if I can also say that Daddy would be extremely proud of the woman you are and the woman who you are becoming. And I'm so grateful that all of his lessons and his foundation is a part of his legacy that you continue to carry. Love you. Love you. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed Redirection with Terri-Karelle and Toni Aiken, because, by the way, you did a great job. It looked like you're coming from our work, Toni. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode with Tashai, this episode of Redirection with Terri-Karelle, let us know. Let us know. Give us the feedback. If you are listening on your podcast platforms, you already know what to do. Go ahead, rate us, give us the reviews. It will allow our podcast to be recommended to even more communities and more spaces. And if you're watching the YouTube, go ahead, don't be stingy. You see the subscribe button, you know what to do. Click it, comment, like, share. Our whole purpose here is to impact positively. And I certainly hope that somebody was inspired by Tashai's story. So until next week, be good, be kind, give cheerfully. I will see you then. Thanks, T. Thank you. Thank you to our partners, MasterCard, Heineken 00, Toyota Jamaica, Commercial Concepts, Spaces Jamaica, FHC Credit Union, Beauty Brands by MDS, Go Shore Couriers, and Brescia.